There's an increasing phenomenon across the United States. It's really an epidemic. Around 60 million Americans are in this industry, a number that's doubled in the last 5 years. The managers are across the country hemorrhaging millions of dollars annually into teams they assemble without any interview process, communication during their time working together, payment structure, the managers have hostility between each other, there's no consistency, and they've even been known to drink on the job. So how is it possible to learn anything positive about leadership from this kind of backwards industry? Well, for as wicked as it can be, there's a lot we can learn from fantasy sports. The hostility, number one, understanding the people you're working with and how to effectively communicate with them is essential to a productive workplace. The hostility fostered by fantasy sports' competitive nature creates communication barriers akin to those found in competing professional groups internally and externally. The difference between alienating or motivating a counterpart at work or in fantasy sports can be very similar. The tone you present your dialogue with and your intentions behind that interaction can have a big impact on your success of your communications. Take a look at these examples. This one starts off pretty business formal. I have this, you want this, let's see it. It got pretty personal very quickly. Let's take a look at another one. This one features some more kind of combative elements of conversation, calling someone insane, and then saying, don't worry about my team, with emphasis on that. Now this one kind of gets a little bit more to the point, a little bit quicker. He wanted no part of that deal at all. So what can we learn about communication through fantasy sports? Well, effective communication is essential to creating a positive work environment. Former RBC Financial Group VP Jim Rayer utilized a say-do tactic to promote trust within the company. Say what you want to do, then how you enable people to do it. Combative conversation will never lead to success in fantasy or the business world, so say what you want, but establish the foundation for how that will get done. It doesn't have to be overly formal in either context, but make it personal and real, and make sure there's an emphasis on how it will get done. Number two, with such a wealth of information available about today's sports, those that take the time to access that data, synthesize it in a way that makes sense to them, and apply it to their fantasy sports usually end up with the most success. Think of fantasy analysis like investing. It might sound insane, but with nearly a $3 billion industry last year, it might be worth your time. Dr. Isaac Peterson studied expert projections in fantasy football from 2012 to 2015 and found an R-squared value of 0.63, which means that they account, experts do, for 60% of player variation in their production. Comparatively speaking, 51% of analysts' ratings on the Dow 30 were correct in 2012, here we'll find that in a longitudinal study from 1981 to 2016, the top 10% of stocks analysts were most hopeful about generally performed worse than the 10% of stocks that they were most pessimistic about. Take the case of James Tran. He won $1 million competition in fantasy sports because of a decision, in part, because he made a decision that only 0.1% of fantasy owners made. He started a tight end with no history of consistently good results or performances, and when asked why he decided to go so bold, he only divulged two secrets. One, 90% of the touchdowns the defense he was playing against gave up was to tight ends, and his cost-relative value is superior to those options. See, it's those who take the time to find the information and integrate it into their work that are usually successful. At the very least, they have a solid foundation in their preparation for their next task. This is particularly true in leadership roles. Using evidence-based leadership, we can break down preconceived notions and present you with a more statistically factual reality. While there's a place for instinctual decision-making, people who refuse to adopt these modern methods are cheating themselves of a more complete decision-making spectrum at work or in fantasy sports. Finally, every working professional and fantasy sport player will experience some sort of failure, sometimes really crushing failures. If you invest the time to position yourself to succeed at work or with your team, but lose out in a big promotion or the championship game, that can be a sinking feeling. However, those that are able to find the silver lining and learn from mistakes will ultimately triumph. Feedback is the catalyst for results. Although it might go against our innate need for self-preservation, or assessing your mistakes internally or voluntarily asking for it as opposed to hearing it in an unsolicited fashion can be a constructive process that, when filtered appropriately to the context and avoiding extremes, can be a real gift. It might be bizarre, but these are 3 pillars of leadership that we can learn from fantasy football. So the next time your boss asks you why you're adjusting your lineup during working hours, tell them why. Thanks for your time. Wow.